where is life going? I don't know. So I mean, to be always open to new adventures and to new opportunities, no matter how old you are. That's important. Oh, I'm too old to do that. Oh, who told you that? You told you that.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, a podcast by the NLSA Collaborative. Some Stutter Law is Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about living with language disorders. We speak directly to people living with speech and language disorders and others, such as speech language pathologists, researchers, educators, and family members. We use inclusive language and themes to help rebuild confidence and hope by dismantling myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers. My name is Greg O'Grady, and I'm a person who stutters and a co-host of Some Stutter Law, and Newfoundland Labrador's first podcast about communication disorders, along with my co-host.
And my name is Katelyn Mayo. I'm a future speech language pathology student, and I'm Greg's co-host on this podcast.
Some Stutter Law mission is dismantling and rebuilding stuttering. Let's start listening. Some Stutter Law mandate is in the spirit of Newfoundland and Labrador's humor, robust and frank interactive discussions. Some Stutter Law podcast aims to rebuild confidence and hope for today's and tomorrow's persons who live with speech, language, and communication barriers by dismantling stuttering, myths, stigmas, stereotypes, and barriers.
The objectives of Some Stutter Law podcast are raising awareness, education, understanding, and acceptance of stuttering and communication disorders within our province by providing support, current information, research, and resources about stuttering, raising awareness that communication disorders are a quality of life issue. Throughout life, stuttering and other communication impairments can impact a person's life emotionally, educationally, physically, socially, and vocationally. Some Stutter Law podcast is a safe space where guests can be themselves without fear of being judged.
Today, Some Stutter Law welcomes Mary Wood. Mary first attended a conference for people who stutter in Ottawa in 1993, where she presented a workshop on self-esteem. After stuttering for over 50 years, she had discovered information on the fear of rejection and how it showed up in her life. Her journey was changing from fluency to self-acceptance. Since that first conference in 1993, Mary has spoken at the Canadian Stuttering Association, the NSA, and the ISA conferences in Canada, the United States, Europe, and Great Britain. In 2005, she was ordained as a Unity minister, a lesson that taught her you never know what's around the next corner. So welcome, Mary, to Some Stutter Law. We really appreciate you being here. Mary, I'm really sort of intrigued when you said it in your introduction, how your journey was changing from fluency to self-acceptance, because we know that people who stutter have difficulty with self-acceptance. Do you want to share your thoughts to our listeners?
Sure. I think it all started, because I had done speech therapy for many years. Mind you, speech therapy for me when I was a child certainly isn't like it is today. And then I found a group. I was in my late 30s, and I found a support group where I think he was a therapist in Toronto. And anyway, part of the focus was that we were asked to face our fear around stuttering. We would go out into malls almost, I think it was once a week, and we had a partner, and I call my partner Wild Bill. And anyway, Bill and I would go out and stop people who were shopping and ask them what they thought about stuttering. I'm going to lead into this. And then I read a book by Napoleon Hill, and it's called Think and Grow Rich. I thought it was about making money because I was a single mother at the time. But in that book, he lists the 6 main fears in our life. And the second fear was the fear of rejection. And I can remember sitting there and thinking, that's it. That is totally it for me. I was scared of what people would say when I talked, how they would treat me, whether they would accept me, whether they would love me. And it all came from this place of fear. And so that's when I started to look, okay, how does the fear show up? Where does it show up? Almost every day in every minute. So anyway, I kind of forget your first question. So if you want, I got on a roll there.
Oh, that's no problem, Mary. So how did you make the transition from stuttering to self-acceptance and like not putting as much emphasis on fluency? How did you make this transition going forward?
I don't know if I can answer that in a single sentence. I think it was I think it was slow and over time. And as I started to look at where the fear showed up in my life, then which was mainly around, would you love and accept me? And as I started to look at that, and I was reading so much. I don't know whether I can mention this, but anyway, I'm going to mention this. I'm actually writing a book, and it has all of the workshops that I've ever done in it. And one of the first workshops that I did was I started to look at what I was thinking about, what were my thoughts that I was having. And somewhere along the line too, and I can say this too, but I also started and also switched churches. And I started to go to Unity Church, which is more of a spiritual look at life rather than a religious look at life. And through that, I just started to ask questions, but who am I really? And for some reason, it became apparent to me that it's more important for me to accept who I am as a person who stutters rather than to be fluent all the time so that you will accept me as a person who stutters. Greg, this journey started in 1989 when I went to a workshop in Toronto led by Bob Proctor, and it was called Born Rich. And I thought it was about money because I was a single mother at the time. But I came away with the words, my mind controls my body, and what I think about, I bring about. I didn't know what they meant at the time, but on the way home in the car, I got these words, I don't have to stutter anymore. And it's like, what is going on here? What is happening? And as I say, even though I'd never heard those words before, I just knew. You know how sometimes you just know when you read something that it's true for you? I just knew it. And that's what really started me on this, really to look at myself rather than to look at the stuttering. I don't know if that answers your question. Anyway, and I think it's a lifelong journey. I'm still there. I'm still there.
You know, Mary, I'm always amazed with how my mind, as a person who stutters, works against me. because I've got to be so careful, and it's so careful as to what I say to myself, because I'm the only one listening, and it allows me to affect how I perceive others, people, other, it sort of it really impacts how I perceive the importance of being fluent, so that I can be accepted, feeling worthwhile, and it's a challenge that we all have, and is ongoing.
I did affirmations from the Proctor seminar when I went to, I actually did that seminar 6 times. I went back 6 times to the same seminar, but I heard different things every time I went. And actually, I spoke to Bob Proctor, I think, at the second workshop, told him that I am a person who stutters. And anyway, he gave me an affirmation to say. Where did it? It'll come back in a minute. Anyway, some days I have to wait because it's out there in the universe somewhere. And then I did another one that he recommended. I am love, I am joy, I am enough. And 2, I used to say that in my car. I used to sing it to me. I used to say, I was just recently separated at the time, and my kids would come up to me and I'd be talking to myself, looking at myself in the mirror, and they'd think their mother had cracked up. But I found that saying affirmations to me that started to change my thoughts I had about myself. I am love, I am joy, I am enough. And I still say that to me some days. I'm enough. I don't have to be who you want me to be.
You seem, Mary, that work, as you mentioned before, this has been quite the transition, a lifetime journey for you in terms of moving from a mindset of emphasizing fluency to be towards self, self-acceptance. Yeah, and do you feel freer now, Mary? Like, do you feel that Mary can be herself and love herself?
And if somebody, and if somebody I've learned along the line, along my life, pardon me, that if somebody wants to laugh at me when I stutter, it's not about me, but it's about them. And that was a big realization for me. When I stutter, if someone wants to laugh at me, that's not who I am until I start to believe that they know who I am. They don't know who I am because sometimes I don't know who I am. They don't know who they are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a super interesting perspective, and I think one that a lot of people who stutter kind of need to work towards. And so I'm wondering, obviously you have quite a lot of experience with this. You've been on this journey and you've kind of worked a lot. It's evident that you've worked a lot on changing your mindset. And I'm wondering if you could say something to your younger self, or if you could give some advice to a young person who stutters, who's kind of hasn't been on this journey yet. What's something you would say to them?
Oh. And I would just ask them really to start to look at themselves for all of the attributes that they really have, because people who stutter are usually very intelligent people. And I decided to take that and to make that real for me. Whether it is or not, I don't know. And so no matter what somebody says to you, and this is hard for maybe a younger person to understand, but it's not about who you are. And so when I was 10 or 11 or 12, there's a young fellow, I go on the WSN call on Saturday mornings at like 7 o'clock in the morning for me. But anyway, and there's a young man from England who is so acceptance of himself as a person who stutters. And it's what he's learned from, I think, from attending conferences, but also from the support that he has gained from his family, from his teachers. And so it can be scary for young people to step out. It can be scary for adults. It can be scary for anybody to step out and to allow it out. And so what do I say to them? You know, it's a long journey. It is, at least it has been for me. It might not be for someone else, but it's a journey about accepting ourselves, about appreciating ourselves, and also to realize how strong we are, as you know, as people who stutter. We've been laughed at, we've been made fun of, and yet every day we just wake up and we just start all over again. We speak again in whatever way we speak. We have so much courage. We really do. We really do. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's like, and I mean, at the conferences, the CSA conference, the NSA conference, National Stuttering, Canadian Stuttering, there are so many more support systems now for youngsters, for young people who stutter. So, start to pay attention to those, start to be part of those too. And also I might say, I think it's important for the families also to be involved in this. My father stuttered and I stutter, and we never, ever talked about it. And he died when he was 80 years old. Yeah. And that's one thing that I wish. However, there's nothing that I can do about that, but just make sure that I'm open and honest in my conversation with my kids about anything, really. That's a test sometimes. Oh dear. Anyway.
So Mary,
Just shake my head.
So Mary, how did you make the transition then to become a minister? What happened there?
What happened? Well, I said I ended up in the Unity Church, and I was really helping out, and and I was actually speaking at church, because I do workshops on gratitude. I think I said gratitude, forgiveness, fear, self-awareness. That's what I do the workshops on, and I was doing that at church. And anyway, and my minister said to me at the time, she said, "You know what, I think you're on the ministerial path." And I was like, I just resigned from the Conservation Authority. I was like 65 years old, and I looked at her and said, "You're crazy, lady. You're crazy." And then one night we were out at a restaurant, I can see it, and we were having a beverage. And anyway, she just looked at me and she said, "What about this ministerial path?" And she asked me a question: "What are you going to do with the rest of your life?" And I sat there and I said, "Oh, you got me." And that was the question that I needed to hear. What am I going to do for the rest of my life? And so I left my apartment and headed to the States for 2 years, which was probably Unity has its headquarters is in just outside Kansas City, Missouri. So I spent 2 years in the States there. And then I come back and I was at a church in Fort Wayne, Indiana for 6 years. And then I come back to Canada. And now I'm retiring. I'll be 85 in March. Don't you think it's about time? Eh? So we can never know where life is going to lead us. And if we have the courage and if we keep saying yes when things show up, that kind of, I really go with what feels right, what feels good to me in my heart sometimes, rather than trying to figure out the whole thing, you know.
I'm just reflecting on the question that your friend asked you. What am I going to do for the rest of my life? And sometimes I ask myself the question, and even now when I'm retired, what am I going to do when I grow up?
Yeah.
And it's so true, Mary, because I think a lot. I mean, this is Greg O'Grady speaking here. Like I think people are so caught up in survival, the survival mode. Let's get through the next speaking experience. Let's get through the next job interview. That we lose ourselves. We're on this treadmill of always trying to just survive, just get through the emotions, and so I think we lose a lot. Well, what's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think and also, during this journey, I've really had a lot of support too. As I said, I've been at CSA conferences and been involved in that since 1993. So it's not as if I felt alone. I was really active in the NSA for quite a while. Went to almost all their conferences. I haven't done that lately, but I think that's really a great part of it. I just got something else, stuff comes in, and I just got something else when, which I think is important. When I worked at the Conservation Authority, I was just introduced to all of this new fear stuff around stuttering. And anyway, the general manager's secretary was talking to me one day, and I was talking about my stuttering. And she said, "Oh, you want to own it, do you?" And I said, "No." And I've never called it my stuttering since then. It's always been the stuttering. And that might not be important for someone else, but it was really important for me because I felt like I was attached to it, that it was something that I owned almost. And that was a big awareness for me. So, I mean, there has been, God, there has been so many people along the way that have showed up, that have offered me advice if I wanted to take it, and for some reason I've known.
I'm wondering, Mary, now Katelyn, as you know, is on her journey of becoming a speech language pathologist. What advice do you have for Katelyn, for the speech language pathologists out there, in this whole area of self-acceptance, working with the clinical component plus the whole emotional area of stuttering? What advice would you have or suggestions?
Whoa. I've worked with Carla as a speech language pathologist. That's been part of the support group. Her and I actually led a support group for many moons. And then when I left, so her and I have worked together. And I think she's always been willing to listen to what other members of our support group say, as well as what her training is really. And I'm enthused, I'm excited, I'm pleased, and this is my thoughts, that now for some speech language pathologists, they are focusing on the emotional part of it, because so much of speech at SLPs have focused on the end result that comes out of your mouth, and they don't look at where it started, why it's there, or anything else. And I know that, you know, that's what I'm enthused about these days, because, you know, like I sit on some calls with some speech language pathologists, and that's where I think I'm enthused. So I don't know where your path is, and whatever way you decide, like I say, I just speak what's on my heart and what's on my mind, and whether anybody accepts it, I'm not responsible for anybody. And I remember that most of the time, but I still have problems with that around my kids. So, you know, yeah.
Mary, I'm glad that you brought up the importance of a support group. Katelyn at this point is working on a project of the benefits. You want to share a little bit? Okay, do you want to share? Katelyn, want to talk to Mary about what you're doing and get her feedback? This is quite timely, Mary. Thank you.
It really is. Yeah, I just got off of another Zoom call talking about support groups. So for my fluency disorders course, we are doing an intervention project, and my group has been assigned to talk about the importance of support groups for people who stutter and their efficacy and how they work and how they benefit people who stutter. So maybe you wanted to speak a little bit about your support group experience and how that's influenced you.
Yeah, I mean, the support group for me was, I was part of it for so long. And then when I went away to school, but it was an opportunity. It is an opportunity to really say what's on your heart, and to stutter if you stutter, and to express your emotions too, because sometimes how we feel about it is not kind of allowed, or we don't feel comfortable in saying, you know what, that makes me really mad. I'm hurt, I'm sad, I'm mad. And so I think support groups also are an opportunity really for us to meet other people who stutter, hear how they feel about it, and just to find out that there's others out there in the world who are experiencing what we're experiencing. I think they're really important. I think they're really important. And I don't know, I don't know how you get people who stutter, because mind you, it is, I think, so much more out in the open than it has ever been before, you know, because of Zoom, because of other ways that stuttering is being more talked about than it has ever been before. So no, I think that's important. Can I also say that I think it really helps too in a support group to have a little bit of structure, and to have not just have all the people meet together. Maybe we have a time where we can express how we feel, what's happened in our week or whatever, and to have a topic, I think, that's really, you know, relating to stuttering in some way, so that the group just isn't talking about how we feel about it, even though that's a part of it, that there's some, I know the word, it's a learning that we really come together, like some support groups that I've listened in on, it's more about, oh, how was your week? Oh, isn't that too bad? Oh, and what are you going to learn from that? Mind you, that's a part of it, the understanding, but just not to spend the whole time on, excuse me, the moaning and the groaning about it. And maybe that doesn't sound fair. Oh, dear. And I just got another thing that comes up. The last group of people that I wasn't open about stuttering, and this was only about 4 or 5 years ago, was if I was in a group of other ministers, I didn't want to stutter in front of them. Now, isn't that, oh no, I'm not going to stutter in front of you. So, I mean, this is, I believe this is a lifelong journey that we've said yes to, whether we like it or not. And oh my God, if you can't laugh, forget it.
So Mary, with regards to support group, what would you feel are some of the challenges or some of the red flags that I guess the facilitator, the leader, the group participants need to be aware of, just to keep it going and keep it, beneficial for the members to keep coming back? What is some of the challenges, the red flags we have to really sort of be aware of?
I think sometimes I can remember for a support group that I used to go to in Toronto, that we went around the table. It was quite a large support group. Anyway, and there was actually a time limit. Mind you, I don't think it has to be this structured, but I know sometimes in a support group, one person tends to kind of take it over. And I think then other people who are there, I think they get discouraged because why did I come to the group if I can't take part in the group? So I think that's important. I think that's important, just to maybe to lay out in some guidelines, not really structured as it was structured back then, but just to let each person know that in the support group that I can attend now and then, we go around in a circle and each person has time. We haven't had to mention that because nobody, but I can remember that other one though, where somebody just went on and on and on. Yeah. And to make, yeah. You know what I thought about too? Our support group used to go out in the community. Bill, we used to have special days, and that was organized by the support group. We would have like a mini conference, and we would invite other people in the community. So it was more than it was more than just the 6 or 8 people getting together. And it was, okay, how can we get the word out into the community? And I think that depends on the size of the group and what their focus is. And whether they want to have a speech language pathologist as a part of it, like a lot of the groups don't want this, and yet, with our group here in Burlington, Ontario, that's where I am. We've had a speech language pathologist because she's not, I get it, because she's not there to tell us, she's there to learn. She's there to learn from us. Yeah. So what are some of the things? So Katelyn, can I ask you, what are some of the things that you're finding out about support groups?
I mean, pretty much similar to things that you've been saying. It's that sense of community, I think, is what a lot of people across in the research and across people I've spoken to. It's that sense of community, that sense of feeling like they're not alone, because stuttering can be so isolating.
Yeah,
And so that sense of knowing that they're not alone, and that there's other people who are like them and who are experiencing similar things, and that just gives them a sense of comfort. And that's kind of what I've been hearing.
I know that when we were, and I mean, this was quite a few years ago, so there's more information through the CSA now than there ever has been before, I think. And also I can remember that we also went to the NSA and asked them how they ran their support groups and how we could learn from them. So I think it's also about all of us, asking and knowing that there are many organizations out there that can help us when we start to organize something.
Mary, I'm wondering, does it knowing that your support group has been around for a while, does your group have a system in place to reach out to members who haven't been attending or have drifted away? Do you have an outreach program or connection of somehow?
As I say, I haven't been attending the support group meetings because they're on the same night as the board meeting for the church, and I have to be there. And I have to be there now after the end of December. I won't have that. But I know that everybody gets an invite for the meetings. As I'm sitting here thinking, I think it might be a good idea really for someone just to make a phone call now and then, not to ask the person back to the group, but just to see how they're making out, and I do the same thing with the members in the church. I haven't done it for a couple of months because there's been so much other stuff going on. But anyway, just to say hi, how are you doing? Not asking them if they're going to come back to church, but I think that would probably be a way. Or else, if some of them don't want to do phone calls, but not very many people are in that place anymore, I don't think, just to either send out emails or, and you know what, we always used to have a Christmas party where they can invite their spouses or not. And we haven't done that for a couple of years either. So we would have a couple of social events through the year too. So it wasn't all about stuttering. Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes I think, if I'm not having fun in the midst of all of it, I'm not doing it.
Mary, you're so right, because life is too short. We need to have a few laughs every now and then. And but just listening to your thoughts about the support group, has given me some ideas for our support group in Newfoundland here, because I like your idea about the members of a support group hosting a conference, because I think if the members of the support group got together, host a conference, they choose a theme, they choose a speaker, that could also be therapeutic as well, And I like the idea about, the thought about the families, having a family night, bring your kids, family to a support group, just talk about stuttering and just have as an informal conversation, just to make it a little more interactive, because families know so little about stuttering, and that can impact the person who stutters, i.e. therapy, for example, speech practice decisions. You know what I mean? So I think, Katelyn, we really have some good ideas there for our group in Newfoundland. Yeah. And I like your idea about the support group going out for a few hours for a dinner, whatever, just to make it more interactive. And I like the idea about reaching out to a member that hasn't attended for a while, because I mean, encourage the member to come back, but just have a conversation. How are you doing?
How are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And as I say, I don't know what next year, I don't know what next year brings for me. I'm thinking of moving out of my apartment at the end of February. As I say, I live in Burlington, Ontario. And I'm thinking of living in the States, going back to somewhere around Unity Village, because I got a lot of friends there. And so I might be living in the States for 6 months and living here for 6 months. And it's like, here I am, as I say, where is life going? I don't know. So, I mean, to be always open to new adventures and to new opportunities, no matter how old you are, that's important. Oh, I'm too old to do that. Oh, who told you that? You told you that, So anyway, and you know what? And where I might be staying in the States with a friend of mine who is actually the minister at Unity Village. So then I will have things to do while I'm down there, because I can't wake up in the mornings and sit on my butt on my couch and think, oh, what am I going to do today? Anyway. And you know what? There is a NSA support group in this little town in Missouri. And so I'll be able to be involved in that. Yeah.
So it's obvious then, Mary, that we need to encourage Katelyn, even as a student, to attend support groups, because having like new eyes, new eyes, thoughts within the field of speech language pathologists will help us, you know what I mean, as well, and help Katelyn. Do you have any more thoughts about that?
Just and Katelyn, just the fact that you are that you are willing to do this and to step out and listen to people who stutter or don't stutter, and that you are willing to work with Greg, take your time to do this. It says to me that you're open to other ways of looking at therapy, or what do they call fluent? You know what? Pardon me, but the word fluency drives me crazy. So anyway.
Yeah.
And I know that probably can't be changed, but it's like, and I mean, some of the therapy, I believe, is still focused on fluency. And so we just accept that and know that that's where the people are at, because there's no sense, if I get mad and angry about that I'm not going to be able to listen to what they have to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've noticed that, and I've become frustrated with that with some readings and things in my course that I'm taking, where they're focusing solely on fluency and saying social and emotional change will come if you just focus on speech targets. And I don't think that that's the case. And if you talk to someone who stutters, they don't think that that's the case for the most part. But it's been frustrating kind of reading through some of those things. And every time they get the chance to speak up in class or speak with groups and group projects and things like that, I try to kind of, take what I've learned from the podcast and share that around as well. And encourage everybody to speak to people who stutter and listen to people who stutters stories, and not just, the literature that we're reviewing in class, because, one thing that has been mentioned is that the person who stutters is the expert on their own stutter. And that is so true. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as students and as future clinicians.
Yeah. At the end of the book, I'm going to put a list of the books I've read. And so one that comes to mind is feel the fear and do it anyway. And I know when I read that, it was like, okay, you know, I can't, I found some words I written when I was coming back from a conference in California, and I was on the plane, and I wrote. It's actually part of the book, but it's entitled "It's Not Really About Stuttering," and I don't think it is. It's really about so much more than stuttering. And that was a big one. I wrote that in, I think, 2013 or 14. And it's so much more than, you know, the speech that comes out. Years ago, I was at an NSA conference, and I got to sit down with Joseph Sheehan's wife, Vivian Sheehan. And at the time, I don't know how we got started talking about voluntary stuttering. And that's one of the main things that really changed my life. And I still do that. If I think that I might stutter or something. And even though I don't really care anymore, it's just easier to get through it. So, I mean, all these people show up in your life. And I think if we're open to it, and you can always say yes to it and then find out that it's not really for you, you know, and we don't have to go along with what everybody else is saying we should do. That's another thing that I'm working on these days, looking at all the shoulds or shouldn't in my life, for me, for my kids, for the traffic that doesn't move the way I want it to move.
So I'm just wondering, Mary, when will your book be on the bookshelves now?
I don't know. All the chapters have been done. I'm getting them proofread and edited. So it should be sometime next year, early next year, January, February, somewhere around there.
Did you say that the title of your book is not all about stuttering? Is that the title, or just correct me if I'm wrong?
No, that's one of the chapters in the book. Oh, I can ask you this. I've been looking, because I do a workshop called Beyond the Fear. And I thought, how's it titled Beyond the Fear of Stuttering? A Journey of Self-Acceptance and Freedom. How does that grab you?
It actually sounds good. It sounds good, because I think, you know, you really hit the nail on the head. It is a journey. It's a struggle to actually reach it isn't a destination. It's a journey, and I think it's a journey of acceptance. And part of the big acceptance is overcoming and befriending the fear. So I actually like it. What's your thoughts, Katelyn?
Yeah, no, I think it sounds great. It definitely sounds like a book I would pick off the shelf. And so that's good. And it definitely sounds like a book that I would 100% recommend to clients in the future. So.
Well, one of the women, or the woman who actually proofread it, she's a person who stutters. And anyway, she said, Mary, she said, I would read that, because she said this really applies to life, not only applied to stuttering. So anyway, yeah.
Well, we look forward to reading your book next year, Mary.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, so we will have to let you go. But Katelyn, do you have any last questions, or Mary, do you have any thoughts before we let you go? This has been a really fun, enjoyable interview. And what I'm impressed with you, Mary, is you really have appeared to have a sort of peace of mind about you. I mean, you're reaching a stage of a good peace of mind, which gives us insight, clarity, and perspective. So I really said that actually comes across. Yeah.
Well, thank
Good.
you. Remind me of that some days, will you, Greg? No, and I just want to say thank you, because each of us, as we step out of where we've been and where we are, and just share and be willing to be open about it and honest about it, whether it's in line with someone else or whatever, because I think all aspects and all thoughts about stuttering really, or else how to live your life, and I believe that's all one. And so I think just sharing that with each other. And so I just want to thank you, Greg, and you, Katelyn. It has been an absolute joy to spend time with you this morning. You're open. We've been able to laugh. We've been able to share with each other. I've learned from you. So that about covers life.
Thanks again, Mary. We really had a fun time. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and maybe we will see you at a conference one of these days.
Take care, Mary.
Some Stutter La, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering, has so much to talk about. Let's start listening.
This has been an episode of Some Stutter La, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering. Some Stutter La is hosted and produced by Greg O'Grady, Katelyn Mayo, Dr. Paul DeDecker, Melanie Crane, Emily Murphy, and Luca Dinu. Some Stutter La is available on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Podcasts, and Radio Public. Wow, that's awesome. You can also check out the Some Stutter La channel on YouTube. To ask a question, send us a comment or suggestion, or just to get in touch, find us online at Some Stutter Podcast on Instagram, or at Some Stutter La Pod on Facebook. And thank you so much for listening.